Boston, the winningest sports city this century. Each championship deriving from a plan. Join us as we discuss the next Boston Banner Blueprint with your hosts, Josh Finkel, Nick Walsh, and Nate Philbrook.
What's up, everybody? We got a very special edition of the Boston Banner Blueprint podcast. We're here with GilletteNation, or as we know him, Ethan Hurwitz. We're going to bring him on in a little bit, but before we do that, Nate, plug those socials.
Of course, that always starts on Twitter/X at Boston Banner BP, Boston Banner Blueprint on Facebook and Instagram, and then, of course, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, Boston Banner Blueprint. Go ahead and like, subscribe, rate 5 stars, share with your friends, family, and neighbors. Do all the things and listen to all the episodes. Without further ado, let's bring on our very special guest.
Yeah, here he is. So we're going to bring him on. Let's change up the layout real quick. There we are. Nope. There we go. That's better. I'm not the special guest. Ethan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun to do these.
So without, getting too into the show here, I first want to just kind of, you just mentioned before we started, you've been doing this 6 years. So take me through that journey a little bit of where you started, what created the idea of what to start, and then what led you to, 6 years in.
Yeah. So whether I want to admit it or not, it was sort of just my identity in high school was just a Patriots kid. Like, people would just come up to me and just ask about the Patriots. And so that was always just a big talking point for me. I live 10 minutes from Foxborough, so it's always sort of been ingrained that I'm a Pats guy. And it was right after their 6th Super Bowl. So I was just reposting Patriots stuff constantly. And it was to a point where I always did it. But it got to a point where my friends were like, you got to chill with this. So I was like, you know what? I know enough. I feel like I have enough creative juices to make this somewhat interesting. I'm just going to make a Patriots page. And it kind of took off, like, well beyond my wildest expectations. I had a podcast with a few other pages that, sort of springboarded into a pretty big following. And so it's just been sort of 6 years of, I'm a 22-year-old kid who just likes the Patriots. It's really nothing special. There's nothing really cool about me. I just sort of have a nerdy fascination with the team. And it's just has sort of taken over my high school and college life. Is just, this has been sort of the last 6 years for me. It's just the first thing I think about and the last thing I think about before I go to bed is always this team.
That must be miserable the last couple of years.
Yeah, the ongoing joke is that the second I started my page, the team just went downhill and hasn't won a playoff game since. So I might need to take one for the team and just sort of delete my account. But no, it's the last few years have been rough, but I've enjoyed it.
Well, hopefully after this offseason, the rough patch is there's greener pastures on the way with Mike Vrabel. How did you feel about this coaching change going away from Mayo after 1 year right into Mike Vrabel?
I think that was sort of what they hoped to do last year. I think that, again, this is me just sort of speculating here. I think the plan was for them to have Bill Belichick set the wins record with the team and have him ride off into the sunset and then find their next coach from there. I think once Gerard Mayo started getting some defensive coordinator interviews across the league, the ownership kind of panicked and they really wanted to commit to this guy to be sort of the successor for Belichick. So they wrote it into his contract that he would be the replacement. And the pretty abysmal 2023 season sort of rushed everything and pushed it up a year, that they were like, well, we can't have this. So they got rid of Bill. And again, they were contractually obligated to go with Mayo. I think they probably would have gone with Vrabel if they had not promised in his contract that they were going to give it to Mayo. I think Vrabel just is sort of that guy that he's not Bill Belichick, but if you could look at any coach across the league and say, hey, this is someone that is like a Bill Belichick coach, Mike Vrabel's kind of that guy. A defensive-minded, no nonsense. Obviously, he played here under Bill. I think that was just sort of from the second they fired Mayo, I think that was where it was going to go, was Vrabel was going to be the guy.
Do you feel as though it was justified to let go of Mayo after 1 year?
Yeah, it's hard because a lot of the head coaching positions you sort of have to rise through the ranks. You start as like a coaching assistant or a coordinator, and then you have to pay your dues for 10 years and get it. And I think everyone in the building for the last 4 or 5 years like really liked Mayo, but all he was an inside linebackers coach. He was a very niche position coach for like 4 or 5 years, and he just immediately got that head coaching job. I think Robert Kraft, I think, is over the last few years has made some decisions that are pure emotion based rather than sort of reasoning based. And I think that was more of a, hey, we don't want to lose this guy, so we need to keep this guy in. So we're going to promise him the head coaching job. And I think that he's a player's coach. That's the term that's sort of thrown around, is former players like know how to resonate with players. But I don't think he had the longevity as an NFL coach that really warranted him being a head coach. And I think just the team got so much worse and undisciplined as the year went on that it was hard to really justify bringing him back for a second year.
Now, do you put any stock into the thought that after 23, 24 years of Bill, that Kraft wanted control of his team back, and Mayo was the guy where he could kind of have his thumb on top of Mayo, and it just fell apart so quickly that he realized, hey, maybe get some guys in here with experience that know what the hell they're doing other than me, because obviously Kraft did.
It's hard to really say who has control in an NFL organization, because obviously the owner is the one that's writing the checks. The coach is the one that's around the team 24/7. And so, I'm not in the building. I can't really tell who's saying, like, Robert's walking into Gerard or Bill's office and saying, you need to cut this guy, you need to sign this guy, we're going to pull back the cap spending. I do think there was sort of some rift over the last 4 or 5 years of Belichick's tenure. That was Bill sort of saying, hey, you know what? I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm going to do this my way because I know what I'm doing. And I think there was kind of a point where the team was struggling. I think that sort of happened the second Mac Jones got injured in 2022, and they had to go with Bailey Zappi, and that's just sort of that downhill trajectory that I think that Bill knows what he's doing. Bill's the greatest coach in NFL history, but I think there were just a period of just inconsistent mistakes from the team, from the drafting standpoint, from free agency, that Bill was still going to be stuck in his ways, and Bill was still going to stick with his own philosophy that I think Kraft was like, hey, I think we should pull this back a little bit. I don't know about the whole control thing. I'm sure Robert Kraft isn't trying to run this dictator-like organization, but I'm sure that there was some resentment from Bill and ownership about how things should have been operated.
So we obviously just broke down. So just 1 second, Fink. We just broke down all the negatives surrounding Mayo, but do you feel as though he's the sole reason that last year was an abysmal season, or let's walk through some of the other reasons that contributed towards, the record they ended up with?
Yeah, I think a lot of the struggles were twofold. I think Mayo was sort of thrown into a situation where he probably wasn't ready for it, but also the team was sort of abysmal. It was one of the worst, if not the worst, rosters in football. At that point, when he got the job, there was no quarterback. Offensive line was a struggle. The receivers for almost half a decade have been an issue. So it's not all on Mayo. I think a good coach can alleviate some issues that a roster has. But I just think the team was, so far set back because of how poorly they had been drafting in years past that it was really hard for, I think, any coach to really succeed. You saw that with Bill Belichick. For a team that he had, they only won 4 games, same amount of wins that Mayo had. So I think that there is something to say about having an inexperienced coach and, again, having a rookie quarterback. But I do think the team was set to fail from the second the season started.
Given Vrabel's statement about significant roster changes, which positions do you see with the most turnover? Obviously, like offensive line, stuff like that. But
I think going into any year, and this might just be me being weaned on, hey, like you got to fight for your job, and Bill Belichick not promising a spot to anyone. I think you got to look at every position except for quarterback, punter, long corner. I think those are the ones that are pretty solidified. The rest of the positions, hey, like you can look at every position and say they downgraded or they didn't play up to their potential. Obviously, you have a myriad of draft picks. You have the most cap in the league. So I wouldn't put it past them to really look at every position, whether it's they're looking for someone to be a day one starter or you're just looking for someone to be a camp body or depth going into the season. Other than maybe quarterback and special teams, I really would look at every single position and say, hey, you could probably improve in some facet of this game.
If you're in Elliott Wolf's position, are you keeping or trading Joe Milton?
Hey, if you can get a third or fourth round pick for your backup quarterback that you took a 6th round flyer on last year, I pull that trigger immediately. I think that would be sort of asinine for another front office to be like, hey, we saw one game from your backup quarterback against a Buffalo team that wasn't really trying, and say
it was one game that cost him a lot of draft capital, though.
Right. And I can't fault Joe Milton for that. He's playing for his NFL career at that point. Now he's got teams that are interested in him. So I think it's a good problem to have that you have a backup quarterback that people would probably want. If a team goes and says, hey, we'll give you a 3rd round pick for him, I mean, you have to immediately take that trade, considering you know who your quarterback is going into this season and hopefully the next decade. If it's a 7th round pick, I mean, maybe because Jacoby Brissett's hitting free agency, it's really just right now Milton and May. If you get anything, that's a pretty good trade. I would pull that trigger.
I don't know that I'm in the same camp. You know, a 3rd, sure. A 4th, I'd start to think about it. Anything after that, I think that the depth at the position is and the youth at the position is probably an advantage as the team continues to build. But that's just one amateur podcaster's perspective.
And I mean, and May struggled with getting hit a lot. That was probably a lot because of the offensive tackle. But it's also good you have him. I mean, he is as raw a prospect as you can get is Joe Milton. If you give him another year under an NFL offense and God forbid May gets another concussion or two, like you have someone that you can trust. I just think if the trade is so beyond your wildest expectations, it's a backup quarterback. You could probably find a solid one in the draft.
Go ahead, boys. Jump in.
Nick, how do you not have anything to say? You always have something to say.
I know. I can't believe you're not geeking out here.
Yeah.
Well, I was waiting for the fat guy talks when we get to the offensive line and get more into the names. Everyone knows listening to our Patriots episodes in the past, I'm the fat guy person. I want the fat guys. So I guess I'll go a little off script here with the combine measurements of Will Campbell coming out this weekend, where arm length 32 5/8 and the mark of demarcation for tackles, it seems like it's that 33-inch mark. Will Campbell still on your draft board if you were in that war room?
I'm going to be completely honest, and this was coming from someone who probably 72 hours ago was really saying, take the best player available. Just there's so many holes in this team, take the best player available. And over the last maybe day, I've been more inclined to take Will Campbell than anybody else. And that's solely from the offensive tackle has been a struggle for the last 5 years at this point. I think if you can get someone that succeeded at such a high level at a really productive school, the arm length, sure. Is 4/8 of an inch going to really dictate how he plays against an NFL defensive lineman? Maybe, but I don't think it's come across so clearly in his game at college that it warrants you to look bad at him. I mean, maybe they don't like Will Campbell at that pick, and maybe they've taken offensive lineman later. But I like Will Campbell. I like the demeanor that he has in press conferences. He's cocky, arrogant. He's that country boy offensive lineman that people stereotypically like. I like Will Campbell.
My
I like
point
Travis
exactly.
Hunter. I want Travis Hunter. You think he's at
think-
4? He's at 4. Do you take him there?
I think the team at this point isn't there. They used to be in a position where they could value and say, hey, we could get a wide receiver here, or we could trade down and take a player that we think better suits our offensive scheme. I don't think the team's in a position to do that. I think the team is in a position where you're so devoid of real superstar talent that just the best player on the board, whether it's Abdul Carter, whether it's Travis Hunter or Will Campbell, or you just want to trade down, take Mason Graham. I think the team just needs to take the best player available, because one player isn't going to fix your team. You're not going to be a Super Bowl contender by taking Travis Hunter. Hopefully that is the case. But I think you just need to just take the best player there. Don't overthink it. Sit at 4, trade down to 6. Just take whoever's available, because it's going to be more than just that player that helps you get back to where you want to be. You might as well start with a generational talent.
I like this.
That's my whole point.
You mentioned Abdul Carter, the news about the stress fracture in his foot, and I'm not so much concerns, because if he's there at 4, obviously, I think all of us are in unison that you take Carter. But is there any chance he drops to 4 now in light of this injury news?
It could, and it's always something that I mean, I'm a journalism student, so for the last 4 years, I've been told to question everything as a journalist, and it's odd that all these injuries and all the stuff pops up right around the combine and draft time, and obviously they're doing all these tests, so they're more likely to pop up. But I mean, what better time for his camp to put out something about how he might be injured, he might slip a little bit. Abdul Carter's like a massive Eagles fan. I wouldn't put it past Howie Roseman to trade up to 17, hope that he gets 4 more injuries in the next few weeks and he keeps sliding. I wouldn't really put much stock into it. We still got 5-6 months before training camp starts. So I mean, unless you're going through these tests and you find that it's unplayable for him and it's going to ruin his career, I take no real stock into it.
I agree. He's not going to be there. Travis Hunter will be, though.
It's so hard to say, because I'm sure there's going to be some team that's going to overdraft a quarterback. There's going to be a team that's probably going to – the Raiders I look at are probably going to be like, you know what, we want to jump up and take a quarterback. So I think closer to it, we'll have a better idea of what the top of the board will look like. But this is one of those drafts where it's so hard to predict, because there's not that there are superstar players, but there's not that one guy that you can look at and say, this guy's going number 1. You could make a case for 5 different players going number 1 based off of their ability, the team's needs, team's value. It's really a crapshoot at this point.
You mentioned the Raiders. You think Brady being in the building there now looks at a Sanders or a Ward worthy enough to jump? There's no better guy to
right. I think that
evaluate a quarterback.
I think the Raiders would definitely take that into account. Hey, if Tom Brady likes this guy, let's roll the dice and do it. I know Brady has a prior relationship with Shedeur, and he's got a pretty close relationship with just the Sanders family in general. So I'm sure there's some aspect of it of hey, if Tom Brady thinks this guy is good, maybe we should go get him. But it's sort of hard to say, because is the Raiders GM willing to, and that's where you get sort of the issue of ownership control and taking over. Great, if the minority owner of the team wants a quarterback, is the general manager willing to trade a future first, a future second for the guy that the minority owner wants? Maybe. I just think that there's so many just different factors of how a front office is constructed to have the Brady decision be the ultimate decision for them.
Yeah, so I kind of want to, if you wouldn't mind just humoring me for a second, if I want to paint a picture of what an ideal draft day looks like. Now, granted, this is given Abdul Carter's no longer on the board, as well as Travis Hunter is also off the board. So we're picking at 4. Those 2 guys are off the board. I'd love to take Will Campbell at 4 and then trade up to the end of the first round and select a guy in Matthew Golden that Todd McShay is now all about potentially being the number 1 wide receiver of this class. You know, he's 5'11", 190, so he's on the smaller side, but from all accounts, all of his measurables, his highlights on tape all look amazing. He's a separator. He's a guy that can take the top off the defense. And so this is a guy that I see, if he was 1 inch taller and 10 pounds heavier, he's an easy top 10 pick and the unquestioned number 1 wide receiver in this draft. Is that a guy that, is even – could we potentially be looking at him come the end of the first round with a slight trade up, or is that just a complete pipe dream?
It's how you value the guy. And I know at the back end of the first round last year, there was sort of a big swing on, Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette and Jalen Polk and Lam McConkey. And so you have a pretty early second round pick too. So if you sort of view the receivers as, hey, they might not go in the first round, that might just be like a second round position. Maybe you just stay put and see if he falls in your lap. I think that's just more of a seeing how the board falls. I like the idea of trading up. It's got to be the guy. I don't think the team is in a position to trade up just to trade up and get back into the first round and excite the fan base. I think you're in a position where every pick needs to count. So I like Matthew Golden. It's like him and Ted McMillan are probably 1A and 1B right now, and Travis Hunter is an anomaly, so I'll leave him out of that. I like him. It's sort of, he's rising up. Maybe he goes mid-first. Maybe you look at it in Emeka Egbuka at the end of the first, early second from Ohio State. I just think if you got to trade up, it's got to be the guy. So, depending on how the receivers go, maybe you just sit put in your second round and take a receiver there.
Yes, Nick, he is a tackle at number 4, Will Campbell. I know you're used to measuring things in 1/8 of an inch, but I don't care that he's 3/8 of an inch short. So if he can play and dominate the SEC, if he can play and dominate the SEC the way that he did as a 3-year starter at LSU, he can play in the league. And to your point, Ethan, the mindset in the interviews, I mean, he seems like clear-cut a Vrabel dude. And so I loved his mentality of, if a defensive end goes out and gets 1 sack a game, he's going to be an all-pro, versus if I let up 1 sack a game, I'm going to be unemployed. And so that's the kind of mentality I want on the offensive line. So sign me up for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. He's got the country twang too. He just sounds like an offensive lineman that, he might not be an all-pro, but if you can,
and he's fast.
If you can stick someone at left tackle or right tackle and just leave them there for 10 years, that's a win in my book. I think ideally you don't want to hear an offensive lineman's name called on Sundays. If you can just stick him in, not have to worry about your left tackle for 7 to 10 years, might get a few Pro Bowls, but if he just is healthy and is durable and doesn't allow sacks, I think that's a win for a left tackle. You don't need your left tackle to be mauling people over. You just need your tackles to just not kill your quarterback.
Keep Drake May upright.
Yep.
That is
now, if you take Will Campbell at 4, I just want to read off this tweet with a stat from Mike Giardi from this evening. Over the last decade, 118 offensive linemen were drafted in rounds 1 and 2. 21 of those had an arm length less than that 33-inch mark. And 10 of them became guards. 10 became centers, and only 1, which was Luke Gadek, stayed at tackle. If you're drafting Will Campbell at 4, the odds are that he's not staying at tackle. So are you okay with the guard or center at 4?
I think you got to look at – I'm pretty sure the Titans a few years ago when Mike Vrabel was still there took Peter Skoronski, who was on the smaller side for an offensive lineman, I think he's still at tackle. And just to play devil's advocate, let's say you move him to guard, just kick Mike Onwenu out to tackle. He has experience at that position. I mean, ideally, you want a left tackle there. And it's one of those things where I think the offensive line just struggled so much that if you could just get someone at any of the 5 spots to stay healthy and keep your franchise quarterback upright, I think it's worthy of a 4th round pick or a 4th overall pick. You know, maybe if you start going through the process and say, hey, I don't know if this guy will actually stack up against NFL competition, take an offensive lineman the second rounds, trade up back into the first and take one. You took Caden Wallace last year, who people thought could be a franchise left tackle. You took an offensive guard, Layden Robinson, out of A&M last year. So you still got those 2 guys that are on rookie deals. So I think if you go through the process and realize, hey, maybe the arm length matters more than we thought it did, maybe you just steer away and try to get someone else that can probably better suit what you're hoping from a physical standpoint at that position.
And that was my point to Nick in our group chat when we were talking about this, offline, was everybody wanted the Patriots to go out and sign Alaric Jackson this offseason. And Will Campbell has longer arms than Alaric Jackson to play left tackle. And so, sure, he's not the All-Pro or the Pro Bowl, but he was a guy that people had gone out and targeted as one of the top offensive tackle position free agents to go out and get. Obviously, he re-signed with the Rams, so he's not an option. However, it was a guy that people had identified as a really good fit for the Patriots. And so if a guy that has shorter arms, but he's a proven talent, is a fit, then I don't understand why a guy that's a proven collegiate talent that could be cheaper than Alaric Jackson and with a longer contract would be not a fit. I just don't get that. Because at this point, there is no slam dunk.
And you're not in a position to be like, hey, Will Campbell's good, but I think we can get better value trading down 4 picks. You're not in a position where you need to upgrade your receivers fast. You need to upgrade your offensive linemen fast. You need to upgrade your pass rush fast. You're in a position where, hey, if Will Campbell's the best player at 4 and you're not getting any calls to trade up from 7 to 4 or 6 to 4 or 8 to 4, stay put, take the rookie quarterback or take the rookie lineman on a 4-year deal. He'll get his 5th-year option. I'd say just roll with it.
Now, you said fix the roster fast, fix these different position groups fast. There's no faster way to do it than just opening up the checkbook.
Right.
You have the most cap space in the league going into this offseason. What are some names at these positions you would potentially target if you just had to open up the checkbook and not draft them?
I've always been the mindset that you should sign proven offensive players in free agency and draft defense, because I just feel like with the development stage, it's easier to just get bona fide offensive stars out of free agency that can contribute, and then defensive guys can sort of develop under your scheme. I think you're in a position where you have the most cap space in the league. Last year was a complete dud in free agency. You just need to spend on anyone and everyone. I don't care if you're overpaying someone based off what other people's market value is on them. I think if you have a player that's interested in coming to a cold weather team where there's a lot of state tax and a team that hasn't been good the last few years, I think you got to be like, hey, Mekhi Becton, you had a bounce back year in Philadelphia. You can play guard and tackle. Here's a 4-year deal. I think you need to overpay at some point. I like Ronnie Stanley. I like Mekhi Becton. The receiver free agency is tricky for me because, you got T. Higgins going on the franchise tag. And from all, just looking at it, the receiver free agency class is sort of just stuck in the middle rather than super top heavy. I know Chris Godwin, but, he's pretty injury prone late in his career. I feel like this is just the guy that they're guaranteed to get. I feel Nick Westbrook-Akine, Titans connection. He seems like that middle of the road receiver that they'll just get for a cheap 2-year deal. I like Tyler Conklin. If you don't re-sign Austin Hooper, I think he's a solid, productive backup tight end. I just think you need to overspend. I think gone are the days of, hey, we want a cheap contract we'll sign you to a 1-year prove it deal. I think, to beat out other teams, you need to go, here's a 4-year deal. We'll guarantee you a bunch of money. Here you go. If it doesn't work out, at least we tried. I think you at least need to show some effort in the market.
What do you think about Darius Slayton?
I think he's the guy that people are really connecting the dots there. I mean, I like him. Compared to how Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, and KJ Osborne played last year, I think I probably could have gone out there and caught a ball or two. I like Darius.
I've got faith in you, Ethan.
Yeah, it's my. I haven't played receiver since like early high school, but I just think it's whether it's Darius Slayton, Chris Godwin. You send a 4th or 5th round pick for Cooper Kupp. I just think you need to improve it in some capacity. And don't sign a KJ Osborne type player for a 1-year, $2 million deal. Go out, find a guy you like, give Darius Slayton a 4-year deal with $15 million guaranteed. Is it an overpay? Sure, it is. But at this point, you're not in a position where you can afford to be, cheap with your money. You have a quarterback that people can look at and be like, hey, this guy can compete for the division for the next 10 years if he's here. You might as well get some guys while he's on his rookie deal.
Now, can I just throw something out there that it's certainly not breaking news at this point, but it's certainly news that has come out since we started recording this episode, that Adam Schefter has now said there is a growing belief that T. Higgins is a tag and trade candidate. And so we got news later this afternoon after T. Higgins was marked to the franchise tag by the Bengals for the second consecutive year that the Patriots were waiting to hear back on compensation of a potential trade for a wide receiver. Now this news of Schefter coming out saying that T. Higgins is a potential tag and trade guy. Is that a guy that, we talk so much about, the dream is dashed, and then it could become a reality there?
It's one of the things where, like, you might like Matthew Golden in the second round. You might like Emeka Egbuka in the second round. You might like Trey Harris, the Ole Miss guy, in the second rounds. I like T. Higgins for a second round pick. If you trade a second round pick for T. Higgins, that's the guy. Like, I feel like that would be the best receiver on the market. I would rather trade a second round pick for T. Higgins than say, hey, we got a second round pick. Let's draft another receiver. I think if you make that trade, you immediately give him a contract extension. You have the cap space to do it. Immediately, whether he wants to be traded in New England or not, I'm sure it's not his decision. But if you say, hey, here's $80 million immediately the second you come here, I think that probably makes him pretty happy. I think T. Higgins I would rather have that than another throw at the dartboard in the second round with the rookie.
Especially the way
sorry, Fink.
No, you're good. I said this on like our first Patriots podcast that we did. Just they don't ever hit on talent. So I definitely would rather trade for T. Higgins as well. I'm a big T. Higgins guy. He won me some fantasy matchups this year. So yeah, big T. Higgins guy.
Not too many, luckily.
My point on T. Higgins.
Not in our league. Different league.
My point on T. Higgins is I want the player. I would love him to death here. But for a second round pick, I would do in a heartbeat. But I'm just trying to wrap my head on why the Bengals would do it for that price, because now that they've tagged him, if he can still go out and sign an offer sheet with any team. And if the Bengals don't match it, that team has to give the Bengals 2 first-round picks.
Right.
That's the rule of the franchise tag. So I just don't see why the Bengals would accept a second-round pick when, hey, if you give them a contract, we're getting 2 first-round picks. That's the starting price for us.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a good point. It's really just, the Pats got to go out and try somehow. And
absolutely.
I think it's one of those things where you might not get a second-round pick done, but you got to call the Cincinnati front office and say, what can we do? You can't just sit around and say, hey, without even calling, it's too much for us. We're gonna bow out. I think you need to be invested in a trade opportunity and continually be like, all right, you don't want a second-round pick? What else do you want? Like, you need to surround Drake May with a solid receiver. Josh Allen didn't really start succeeding until he got Stephon Diggs. Jalen Hurts didn't really start succeeding until he got AJ Brown. I think you need to surround a young quarterback with top tier talent, and so you got to go out and do it. And you have young receivers anyway. You might as well get one that can contribute immediately and be your top guy. So whether it's a second round pick and someone else, you trade Kendrick Bourne in that as well, and he seems like someone that's sort of on the outskirts of the room. I think whether it's T. Higgins, whether Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, you need to get someone that can immediately slot and be like, this will be our go-to guy as our number one receiver.
You mentioned Stephon Diggs. How do you feel about him potentially coming here via free agency?
I mean, maybe. There was a video from him a few years ago where he was like just cursing out the Pats fans. I'm sure that was just more of the heat of the moment thing, but at this point, sure. Like we're not at a point where like, hey, I think this guy's a diva. Hey, I think this guy's got an ego. I would rather have a diva and some guy with a massive ego that can catch 13 touchdowns and be Drake May's go-to target for 5 years than say, hey, no, we think Jalen Polk's more of a leader in the locker room. Let's roll with him. So you're not in a position. I think at this point you got to just go with whoever wants to come here, whoever you can get a deal with. I think you just need to go for anybody, and that's sort of the position that the Patriots teams of years past have put this team into, where I don't think you can really be picky with any of the talent across the league.
Switching sides of the ball, we saw Slay get cut out of Philadelphia today. Do you think he's a potential fit to, mirror the field with Gonzo? That would be a pretty dynamic duo for defensive back room.
This is more the thing where, the cornerback room, sneaky is a need. After this season, you only got 2 cornerbacks that are signed for 2026, and that's Christian Gonzalez, arguably your best player, and Marcellus Dial, who was just more of a special teams guy in his first year. I think if you could Darius Slay would be very nice. I don't know how many good productive years he has left in him. I'd say the same goes for like a player like Gilmore. It's a good guy. He's still got solid football for at least a year maybe, but is that someone that you want to commit hefty money towards? Maybe. I feel like that's one of the positions where it's good to get maybe Jonathan Jones back on a cheap deal, Alex Austin back on a cheap deal, and draft some corners that can at least have 4 years under their belt. Because right now you're going into 2026 with only 2 cornerbacks. And so I think you got to get more of a longevity aspect to your secondary more than just let's plug this guy in for 1 year and just move the needle to another year.
What about Charvarius Ward?
Wait a second, Fink. Just because we were on the topic of Slay, I want to stay here for just a quick second. The only thing that scares me about Slay is we touched on Howie Roseman earlier. The guy seems to be hitting all the right buttons the last few years. Why is he letting a guy like Slay out the building just to save $3 million in cap space? It's not like he's saving $15 million. It makes sense there, but for only saving $3 million, and Howie Roseman has this track record the last few years where the dude turns chicken bleep into chicken salad. Like, he hits on everything. That's what scares me about Slay. Like, what does Howie know that the rest of us may not know, that $3 million isn't worth to keep Slay?
Yeah, my go-to when you look at veteran corners in free agency is always Darrelle Revis in 2014, where, it's a Hall of Fame guy that you just got for 1 year, and that was it. So if that's one of the things where it's, hey, like, if you think Darius Slay's got some good football left in him, just give him a 1 year deal, give him a 2 year deal. It's just one of those things that, are you willing to commit to a guy that, just got cut from a team that's been pretty consistent with their roster moves and, might not be playing 4 years from now?
Yeah, I'm not a Darius Slay guy. I like him, but not for the New England Patriots. Maybe the Detroit Lions, but not the New England Patriots.
I think he's probably going to go back to Detroit.
I think so too. They need secondary help just as bad as we do. So Not as bad, but you know what I mean. I'm big on Charvarius Ward. He's been linked to the Pats the last couple of weeks, or last couple of days at least, on Twitter, from what I've seen. And there's also DJ Reed. He's a free agent from New York, the Jets. That's also a guy I'm looking at, but I don't know if they would want to come here. It's the only thing. It's going to be
Yeah.
the thing that I think for most guys is if they want to come here.
Right. It's one of the things where it's, hey, you're not in a position where you can say, hey, take a cheaper deal because we're in contention for a Super Bowl. The real draw to the guy has to be the price tag. And so that's going to come into, hey, we're going to have to overpay for some of these guys. Because, it's great to win, but for someone to, move their family across the country, you got to say, here's all this money that you can get, because we can't throw Super Bowls in your face now. You used to get guys like Chris Hogan on a cheap deal. You used to get Stephon Gilmore, who you gave him a big deal, but you could wave Super Bowls in Darrelle Reeves' face and say, you want a ring? Come here. You can't do that anymore. And I think you got to overpay for some of these guys to start building a culture that you can later say, hey, we've started to win. Come to play for us.
We can't even wave Wi-Fi on the plane in their face.
Yeah, I don't even know how that's like actually possible to have a plane in 2024 without Wi-Fi. That's just it. That's somehow and for the last few years, this NFLPA poll has caught the Patriots with their pants around their ankles. Just it's not a good look for them.
Or even the Callahan article in the Herald this weekend. Apparently, they brought up some dirt on Robin Glazier, where her main job was just to cut costs everywhere around that organization, to the point where the assistant coaches they brought in, I think Callahan said, they weren't given the standard 1 month housing to find permanent housing. They had 2 weeks in a hotel and they were out on their own. Like, to me, that's just petty on Kraft. Like, you got to wait so long with Brady and Belichick being able to pinch nickels and dimes together, because you could throw the Super Bowls in people's face. Like, hey, like I said, come here, you'll win. And you can be cheap on the outskirts. And now the chickens have come home to roost, basically, and he's ending up with egg on his face.
Yeah, it's definitely not been a good look. They fixed their family center, hired someone to help with the families and the children during game days, but I mean, they're when you're trying to watch film on a cross country flight and you can't even get your iPad to load up, there's some issues there.
Yeah, but we can drop, what was it, $7-8 million to give the lighthouse a blue chew and get even more erect.
It's your turn. It's your favorite time, Nick.
I think you know what time it is, Nick.
You got to
Time for
explain
my
it.
2 minutes. Yeah, I got to explain this to Ethan, how this works. We got a little game show kind of that goes on every episode where I ask any question. It can be any kind of random fact, question, riddle, whatever I want that day. And we keep track. We let our guests compete in it as well, see if they can end up on the scoreboard. Current standings are Nick has 3 points. Fink has -1 point. Nate is at a 0. Those are our standings. No guest has got one right. Last week, I had them answer a riddle. Nick got it real quick. Week before that, it was a question about M&Ms. This week, we're gonna go into a little bit of reading. Fink, what's the last book you read, man?
It was a book about Terry Francona, actually.
Really?
The
What
Dan
was it called?
the Dan Chauncey one?
I don't know. I don't remember.
It's definitely an audio.
Nice. Ethan, you got a favorite book?
Favorite book? I don't know if I have a favorite book. The last one I read was Joe Kelly's book, which is Damn Perfect Game, Near Perfect Game, Damn Near Perfect Game. It's one of those things. I'm pretty sure it's sitting on my desk right over there. But I think that was the last book I read.
Gotcha. Nate and Nick, what's the last one you guys read?
I'm a history nerd, so it's probably some book on the JFK assassination. I'm the biggest JFK.
Why is it always going back to this? This is like 3 episodes in a row with him referencing.
You have two kinks. You have two kinks, Nick. Arm length on offensive linemen and JFK assassination.
How about you, Nate? Last book
That's
you read.
no comment.
No comment?
Thank you.
All right. We'll leave it at that. This is, well, the book I'm about to ask about is probably one of my favorite books ever. I read it in middle school. Haven't read too many books since. But my question is, who was the author of The Great Gatsby?
I knew it was going to be about The Great Gatsby.
No way, no one knows this.
Fitzgerald.
Nate gets
F.
it.
Scott
Yeah.
Fitzgerald.
I give it to Nate. He got Fitzgerald. That's
What
enough.
is it? F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Name.
It is F. Scott Fitzgerald.
No, full name. I should get half a point.
No, you do not.
Fitzgerald.
Positive points, baby.
Anytime I hear F. Scott Fitzgerald, I think of the TED 2 scene with Amanda Seyfield, where she says F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Mark Wahlberg and Ted go, "Why F. Scott Fitzgerald? What did he do?"
All right.
So how do you even get negative points in this scenario?
Well,
You get
it's my
question
game.
wrong.
Yeah, my game, so I kind of make the rules. But depending on how hard the question is, I'll take negative points. Like the one for M&Ms, I asked what's the most like common color M&M, and I gave negative points for getting that one wrong. But yeah.
All right, you're done.
So I'm ending the day with more points than Fink already.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm already ahead of him on
Pretty
the
much
standings.
everybody is.
Yeah.
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 Ethan
Yeah.
gets it.
You're tied with our other guest, Brett Schaubs of the Providence Bruins. You guys both have 0.
I'll take it.
And then hopefully we can have you back
Awesome.
on if you keep competing against your own score. Maybe you'll get a point.
And Fink will still be in the negative.
Probably.
So we had the combine wrapped up yesterday. By the time this episode comes out, it will be a couple of days old. But was there anybody that really stuck out to you? I know you did a really, really good job. And so for anybody that is not already following you, that does follow us, go on and follow Gillette Nation. But of tracking a lot of these draft prospects. And so is there anybody's workout that particularly stuck out to you that we're not talking about or that we haven't talked about yet?
I'm always a glass half empty kind of guy. So there are guys that have stuck out to me, but like a pretty negative way. I feel like the first one is Tez Johnson from Oregon. He ran like for
tiny.
his size a fairly slow 40. He's like 155, and I mean he moves quick. He had a really good shuttle time, but I feel like the 40-yard dash is the one that always pops up for everyone as the immediate go-to. I think that I just think that Will Howard also had a really bad day or week. And again, it's really hard to sort of judge people in shorts and t-shirts because I just doesn't feel fair. But I think from a negative perspective, Tez Johnson, who's someone I would really like for the Pats, didn't have a good week. I mean, I it's hard because I don't really take much stock into the combine. I know from a standpoint, from a building standpoint and from an interview standpoint, people love it. I never watch it. I'll keep tabs on it. I don't really care. That sort of seems like a cop-out answer, but I don't put the pads on and let me see you run some routes. That just does more for me than just watching the guy run straight for 40 yards. Because you're not going to have to run a play where it's 40 yards just straight. I mean, unless you're just going deep every play, but then you got some guy covering you. So from a positive standpoint, I think there was the Missouri line or the offensive lineman Menbu. He got like 37 reps on the bench.
On the bench.
And he ran like a sub-5 40. Again, there's no football play in the world where you're going to have to be bench pressing 225 pounds 40 times. But I think that's something that, he's probably just going to get more looks at because he's clearly strong. It's hard for me to really, really get invested into how high someone can jump in the combine.
I think Tony has a
That was a long-winded answer for me to really say I don't really care, but I just tried to make it sound nicer.
Tony, you have a question?
Nick, you can go, man. Go for it.
No, if you got a question, Tony, you go first. I'll go after you.
Sure.
I'm
All right.
curious.
I saw your mock draft you had, and your updated one, the 3.0.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this anywhere where you have them trading with the Jets in division. I think that's pretty interesting. I just kind of want to hear your reasoning behind that, and also who the Jets would pick.
I think the Jets, if anything, would trade up for a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is gone, and I don't think they're going to roll with Jordan Travis as their starter. I just think that, say picks fall and, Abdul Carter goes, Travis Hunter goes, maybe Will Johnson goes, and you start seeing maybe Shadur slip, Cam Ward slip a little bit, maybe Jackson Dart's stock rises through the roof. Maybe the Jets trade. Again, interdivision trades in the draft are always a little weird for me because I'm sure there's some part of them that's like, hey, I don't want to give you any ammo. I think the Jets are probably in a position where you're going to need a quarterback. You're in a big market where you can't really roll into a season with another Zach Wilson type quarterback. You got to sort of sell your product. And I think that, the simulator thing that I have on my computer, you got a first round pick for trading 3 spots. I think that would probably be something where you're going to get a valuable pick in return. So, that's sort of my reasoning is if the Jets want a quarterback, and if you can just get an extra first or maybe 2 seconds in return, I think that's probably the best case scenario for both sides.
So it might have come off that I'm pretty negative on them right now, and I don't tend to be. So trying to wrap the episode up in a more positive light. If you can't say Mike Vrabel or Drake May in your answer, what is the number one most positive thing you're looking forward to this season with this team?
I want to say Christian Gonzalez, just because he should be the face of your defense. I'm going to avoid that because I feel like that's a cop-out answer because I want to think about it. Probably just watching competitive football for a full season. That hasn't really been something you've been able to really say about the team for the last few years is, you got Jacoby Brissett for the first 5 weeks. Team can't block. You're scoring 3 points on prime time. Then you get him hurt. Then you get May hurt. Now you got to try to lose on purpose. You haven't really had a full season where you can be like, hey, we're going to be competitive. I know that for 60 minutes we'll be in the game. I think that's what I'm hoping to see is I've come to a point where it's wins or loss. Yes, I want the Patriots to win every game. I'm a diehard fan. I can accept a loss now. Better than when I was in the glory days of winning and I was 8 and I was expecting them to win every single game. And if not, I would lose my mind. I just want to sit for 4 hours on Sundays and be like, that was an enjoyable football experience. And at least we didn't win, but we have some promise for the future that this team can be competitive. So I just think 16, 17 games of, hey, we were in this game. We won 8 or 9 games. We lost games, but they were by 10 points or less. I think that's the thing that I'm excited about seeing. And I think that's because of Vrabel and May, and you get another year of development. I think it's just one full season of I'm excited to watch the Patriots.
Nick, I think that's a really good question. And I'm actually really curious, 30 seconds or less. I want to hear the other Banner Blueprint boys give their take. So Fink, I want to hear you go first to answering Nick's question.
What I'm most excited for is an Alex Austin extension. I think he's really intriguing. He's played well in his limited time. That's what I'm most excited for.
Tony?
I'll let Nick go. I feel like he's prepared. Let me think about it for a little bit longer.
I would probably say it seems like this year you have more of an opportunity to go out and get one of those star weapons that they tried so hard last year, but just didn't have the pull to bring it in because you had a question mark at quarterback. And I know I said I can't use Drake May, but I think Drake May is a draw for that weapon. So I'm more excited to see who they target to bring in. If it is a T. Higgins or a Brandon Ayuk or a DK Metcalf, if they're going to be aggressive and they can pull it off, that's what I'm more positive to see if who they can reel in.
PT.
I got my answer now. I'm looking forward to never having this high of a draft pick ever again. I never want to have a top 5 draft pick ever again. That's what I'm
That's
looking
a great
forward
answer.
to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a revitalized Josh McDaniels offense. I'm really intrigued about what he's done to revolutionize and update and change what he's working on to bring it back to the NFL stage and just tear apart defenses. That's what I'm most excited for. So why don't we transition to some closing thoughts and let our prized guests here wrap up and Ethan, I'm going to start with you. I want to hear initial, we're still pretty early on here in the NFL calendar, but we got free agency starting next week. So where do you stand and how do you feel as though, are you optimistic, pessimistic? Where are you at?
I'm always optimistic. The last few years have sort of dampened that optimism. But the fact that you have a quarterback that, to what Nick said, has a pull now, players around the league probably look at Drake May and say, hey, this is the guy I want to play with. I think he gives you optimism. You have a proven offensive coordinator. You have a proven head coach. I think that along with your $122 million in cap space, you have to be optimistic about it. If you ask me that question in November and we're sitting dead last in the AFC once again, I'm sure my answer will change. But the fact that you have all these draft picks, you have the highest amount of cap in the league, you can't not be optimistic about it, because they're gonna have to spend. They're going to have to spend, because if not, these people are going to be losing their jobs. You're going to have to hit on these draft picks, because if not, you might be losing your jobs. I think that there's probably a sense of urgency in this front office of like, hey, we got to spend money. And I think that's going to be some sort of optimism for this fan base, is they're not going to sit and hold this money for next year. Like, they're going to go out and spend upwards of $100 million in cap.
Nick, closing thought?
My closing thought is I really want to piggyback off of Tony's answer about not having a top 5 pick ever again, because that's creative and I love that. Like, just go into the season and echo what Vrabel said in the opening press conference. Just be good enough to take advantage of bad football. Like, you or other teams get right game last year. This year, be the team that is the pesky pain in the ass team that basically the Carolina Panthers were for teams down the stretch. Like, be that team. Like, no one's expecting a Super Bowl this year. Like, realistically, like, if come next February we're at a parade, like, I think we'll all be shocked as hell, but just be good enough to take care of bad football and be a representative football team this year instead of a clown show like last year.
PT, closing thoughts?
You guys covered it, man. I think we covered everything we need to this episode.
Fink, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just excited. I think I close every episode with this, but I think there is a blueprint. They definitely do need to spend the money. They need to hit on the draft, but there's definitely a path for them to do these things, and I'm just excited. Hopefully they get some talent in here. Azeez Ojulari, really love that guy. Love the name. I hope he can come in here. But yeah, I mean, I'm just excited. There's no reason to not be. There's no reason to live in the past of the last 5 years that they have been dead last in the AFC every single year. It feels like, but yeah, I'm just excited. Nate,
Hey, if the Washington Commanders could turn around that quickly, so can we.
Yeah, and I'm going to just echo Ethan's. I think that, competitive football, 60 minutes of hard-nosed football, that's really what I'm looking for. I'm looking to compete again. We just brought up the Jets. I think the Jets are going to be back to the laughingstock that they ought to be. And so I look forward to taking advantage of them. And I just look forward to get back to the Patriots way and winning football games. So before we get out of here, Ethan, I want you to let everybody know that is listened thus far where exactly to find you.
Yeah, so Instagram, GilletteNation, 2 L's, 2 T's. I'm on there pretty much every day, so that's a good place to find me. Twitter is Hurwitz Sports. HORWITZ Sports the normal way. That's pretty much it. We'll see where I am in the future, but yeah, Instagram and Twitter is where I'm most active.
100%. So go follow Ethan. He puts out
Ethan,
a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then, of course, go follow the Boston Banner Blueprint at Boston Banner BP on Twitter/X, Boston Banner Blueprint on Facebook and Instagram, and then Boston Banner Blueprint on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Fink, close us out, buddy.
Yeah, Ethan, thank you again for coming on. I'll have to go tell Jack that you were great, and it was definitely worth it. But that's all from us for this edition of the Boston Banner Blueprint. So on that note, Steve Gregory.